And we're also going to provide a whole set of links and resources for you on the page. I'll probably upload that on the event page today, even prior to the content being made available, where we want to have some links to what Tech Lab are providing, but also resource links from all of our vendor partners, PubMatic, InMobi included. So to bring in the panel for today, thank you so much. It's lovely to have you all here, Superstar panel. And just from a practical and almost commercial perspective, Manuela, to start with you, I mean, how significant do you see the reduction in terms of reach and campaign volumes being for the industry once this policy becomes mandatory? How big an impact do you see it being?
Yeah, well, I guess no doubt there will be a big impact across the whole industry, but you know, there's ways to prepare for the upcoming changes, and I guess it also differs a bit for players across the industry. For performance campaigns, for instance, which are based on CPI or CPA, it will have a different impact than programmatic branding campaigns. What we've seen now at Verve, we already see around 50% LAT users, which are users that opted into limited ad tracking already. And that has been rising steadily ever since September last year, when iOS 14.0 came out, and when the new iPhone 12 hit the market. We probably expect that to rise to 80% once the new update for the iOS 14.5 comes in. On the programmatic side, I guess CSPs need to share their SK ad network IDs, and we need to make sure the publishers integrate those into their P-list. There will most likely be quite some impact after the iOS 14.5 release, but yeah, with time, the industry will adapt and learn to adjust to the new environment. So even though it makes a considerable challenge for the whole ecosystem, but yeah, there's no way around it at this stage. What we've seen in our exchange is a bit of a dip in eCPMs since late last year. Yeah, but we've seen those coming back to previous levels, while the LAT users kept growing at the same time, which was not necessarily expected, but it's a good sign for us that the industry can adopt quite well. And a few months down the track, we'll get used to the new normal.
Yeah, no, it's been interesting seeing the companies that have been testing it early, whether with portions of traffic or just flicking the settings on, and what they're seeing. One large application this week told me they're seeing 35% opt-in, and others are seeing a lot more than that. So it's definitely going to be interesting. Yeah. Richard, just as I know we've seen the explainer of SK ad network, apparently can't say SCAD network anymore, SCAN. But look, perhaps just a reminder of the sets of recommendations that, because I know you've been pumping out a lot of information in InMobi, just for any app developers that aren't yet aware or where to start, what key advice can you provide them with, please? You're on mute.
There's always going to be one of us. You're obviously mentioning the fact that it could be before the end of the month. So technically any day after March 20th is when we are expecting, because that's obviously spring when it kicks in the US. Right now, you know, to identify the solutions, it's worthwhile referencing some of the challenges. So I think Manuela touched on a couple there, which was around targeting as well as attribution and eCPM hit. So from our perspective, you know, we're seeing it is going to be a massive impact. I don't think it's well understood in the market, and I think there will be a couple of people that, you know, a couple of companies that have just not caught up yet. Right now, it's almost too late to be able to get ahead of the first wave when it hits. It's then a case of still making sure your business is prepped. There is no one solution. It is how well prepared you are to deal with that problem when it arises. So firstly, the problems that publishers are specifically going to face is lower CPMs. And the reason for that is that the lower addressable pool of consented traffic will be that factor. So Manuela, we agree with that. So it's going to be around 70 to 80% of people that we expect not to opt in. We generally see 25% LAT in the US. In Australia, we generally see around 15% right now, 1.5. So that is going to drop up. One thing I would stress is because of the choice to opt in rather than the choice to opt out, there is also the statistical aspect of the fact that people just have a fatigue with these things and just automatically go, no. So it isn't always going to mean that automatically people don't want to be tracked. There will be that zombified aspect that happened with GDPR, where people are just ticking boxes. So one is the lower CPR on that side. The other is the lesser targeting options. Frequency capping gets hit, audience sizing gets hit. And there is a positive counter in a way, is that, you know, there will be consented traffic in lower volumes. Therefore, there'll be higher demand competitiveness for that, but it won't offset. There will be an impact. There will be an impact for all publishers. There will be some brand campaigns that might shift across more so to Android, because brand campaigns often don't target via the operating system. But one key thing is that while all the advice is being given across the industry is broad, every publisher is different. How well prepared you are is going to be the key. So the solutions that we're looking at and pushing out to market is, one, as per the Tech Lab, you've got to get the scan enabled on your apps, and the ATT, the App Tracking Transparency framework, because without that, your audiences will not be provided the choice to consent. And if they're not provided a choice, they will automatically become non-consented. So there is an impact there. So when it comes to adoption as well, we're seeing that the adoption rate in market will probably be less than 50% within the first month. And the reason we stress that is that when iOS 12 became iOS 13, it was 50% within the first 26 days. And this is an iteration of. So one is they've got to enable that. The second is where it was referenced very loosely, but the info.p list is making sure all the scan IDs of bidding partners are in there. Otherwise, there's demand that is heading your way, but because of the implementation, it could just bypass you. The second is, we mentioned the ATT, run the tests as well. Publishers are not always aware. You only get one pop-up box from Apple in the lifetime of the app being downloaded. So as a publisher, you have a choice of when and where to display that. You can display it on the first page, which we wouldn't recommend. You really want to do it deeper into the app, where the users consume the content, they've used your app for its purpose, they've understood, at least at a subtle level, there's a value exchange, and you are able to tweak the messaging so it engages with them. We do recommend as well that you use your in-house banners and editorial to educate people as to the value exchange, because that's really key as to why. You know, if they can see that message and then they already understand the value exchange, they're more likely to drive the consent up. You can continue to do that past if they have not consented. You just redirect them into the core settings so that they can then make the changes. So it's not you know, one chance. You've got lots of chances, but the pop-up only comes up once. You can also test the timing, run some A/B tests at different stages and see what's optimum for your type of app. The last one is around optimization of yield. So one, integrate with universal ID vendors, either independently or InMobi's launching a Unif ID solution, whereupon you can opt in and automatically be enabled for ID5, InfoSum, LiveRamp, etc. The second one is that if you're on a waterfall system, you'll need to split your supply from consented to non-consented. The reason is, on a waterfall effect, you will not, the floor will be too high for unconsented traffic. So one is split that out. And the second thing then is you can find a different equilibrium for both. If you're otherwise on header bidding solutions, there's a protection against that, or adopt the header bidding solutions. The last one, last two was enable higher CPM inventory. So if you've got interstitials or video formats, we would recommend that you start to enable for them. And the reason is that when we compare non-lat and lat traffic and the eCPMs, we're finding that the higher impact formats has maybe a 20% drop off, whereas the standard IAB formats are effectively seeing a 70% drop off in revenue. Okay. So the last one's first party.
Yeah, I like the yield management aspect, Richard. That's really useful, and you do win the award for longest answer on our webinar so far. Last 8.
Lots to take in.
Congratulations, that's good, gold, absolute gold. And we're going to come to the question about network IDs as well. But Lloyd, I just wanted to come to you first. You know, assuming that OpenWrap SDK is supportive of this, you know, how are you going about supporting your clients directly with the changes to come?
Yeah, and I think Richard covered a lot of great points, and some of them will actually overlap with what I'm going to cover. But we've been telling our publishers to make sure that they update their ATT SDKs to recent versions that support iOS 14 IDFA changes. That's to make sure that if those SDKs have updated to support SKAD network, you take advantage of that. And secondly, Richard talked about the importance of thinking about getting the user consent. And the way that I've been framing it is think about developing a strategy and tactical plan for getting the user consent. And that might involve use of what we call pre-prompt. So pre-prompt is a screen generated by the app where you're giving yourself a chance to kind of explain the why and encourage users to think about opting in. And on top of that, it'd be great to having some tracking and reporting mechanism so that you can monitor the opt-in and opt-out rate of those pre-prompts, as well as the opt-in, opt-out rate for the actual iOS consent screen. And think about having A/B testing framework and server-side partial rollout control so that you can continuously run different tests. As Richard mentioned, think about the timing, think about the user context, when would be the most appropriate time to show the pre-prompt, and then you should be able to gain a lot of insights through multiple rounds of A/B testing, giving you the path to overall improvement in terms of the opt-in rate. So that's one. And with regards to the SKAD network ID that you are supposed to capture in your plist, info.plist file, just quickly, the info.plist file is a small configuration file within iOS app. So this is captured within the app code. And the key idea here is that those ATT SDKs that support SKAD network, when they're making the add request to the cloud, it's supposed to capture all those SKAD network IDs, indicating that, hey, I support these demand partners. And then when that gets propagated into programmatic pipelines, the receiving demand side platform can see that, oh, I'm eligible. So I'm going to go ahead and respond back with app install campaign. So I think there was a question coming in with regards to, should I just go ahead and add all the SKAD network IDs? I think the practical answer is make sure you work with your monetization solution providers, get their up-to-date list, and think about regularly updating so that you take full advantage of all the demand sources that are connected to your inventory.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I mean, is there an issue with there being too long a list? Could there be any issue with latency if you're just shoving an enormous list in there, or just keep it tidy? Or is there any, that seems to be where Augustine's asking.
That's what the newer versions of SKAD network framework that IAB working group has put together is addressing. So the newer versions, you basically use the IAB official list and then use exclusion and inclusion to make that payload much lighter. And just a few more points on the question there. So if you're only running rewarded video today, think about diversifying your revenue stream by incorporating interstitial and banner placements. If you're running 300 by 250 placements, think about running dual bidding of display and video, adding the video for improving your CPM. And overall, contextual signals will become more and more important. So whenever possible, check to make sure accurate and appropriate add request parameters are included, including app bundle, app store URL, and whatnot.
Fantastic, thank you. The answers we've had have been really comprehensive, so I hope, and we will provide the recording of this so you can review it retrospectively. But pulling it back up a bit here, Manuela, back to the sort of philosophical, I mean, you've got to look at it from a consumer privacy perspective. You know, we're increasingly talking about everything having privacy by design these days. I mean, do you think overall it's the right type of product evolution for the industry, or is it just too aggressive? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think in theory it's a great tool, you know, to address the privacy concerns end users have, and that they now have, you know, to get to have that choice how and by who the data is used. Whether the execution of how it is done is ideal, I think that's the question. My concern is that 99% of the users do not understand the changes that are coming up. nor might they think much about it, in too much detail, as Richard mentioned before, and just hit no, So, well, one thing's for sure, advertising is not going away. That's not the case. So the only thing that does happen is that the ads are just going to be less tailored to their likes and interests. And since the lat toggle has been out since last year, I've played around quite a bit with it personally, and I felt I got a better experience with ad tracking on, meaning seeing ads that do actually interest me rather than having random products pitched to me. So I think it'll probably be impulsive. Users might opt in with apps like The Guardian, knowing that'll help provide funding for the journalism. Or you might be more inclined to say yes when you do your weekly Woolies shop. Whereas for other apps where you already pay for a subscription, or when you sit on the couch, play Words with friends, users might not want to share their data here. I guess what's important to remember on the advertiser side is it's not just your app that the user has to opt in with, but both have to have the consent. So also the app you want to advertise in, they also have to have the consent from the users for all of the conversion data we were used to get to be transferred. And as Richard mentioned earlier as well, on the publisher side, the apps will only have a very small window with very little characters to make their case on why they're collecting data and how they're going to use it. So the advice here, I guess, is just get creative, and be really clear with your message. Explain to the users, why they should opt in and what they might get in return. For example, enhanced user experience or some better information based on their location. And just get that user to support you and share some of their data.
Yeah, and it's all part of that fair and open value exchange, right? And it's been interesting already to see some of the messaging that we've seen in the tests that have taken place. I mean, I think there's been quite a lot of information and blogs on the way that between Facebook and Instagram, the messaging there, the way they're sort of testing out different wording. We spoke to an audio app operator this week too, and they're trying to work on the right wording to people to understand the implications of the choices that they make. And what we will do in 4 to 6 weeks' time is we will do a review of what we're seeing and some recommendations and best practices that we're seeing from all of our members. And I don't know if anyone saw TikTok have recently quite aggressively come out and gone, we're going to do even more advertising and personalization, almost as a sort of preempt for it, although they can do a lot within their own world, as it were. There's something that came up, Richard, recently. I know you involved us as IAB Australia in what looked like a good kind of collaborative vendor push with a bit of a spin on it. Could you tell us a bit more about No IDFA, No Problem, please? There's actually a URL, isn't there? NoIDFA,
It's a song in waiting. I'm joking. No, from our side of things, so Liftoff kicked off the initiative, if you like, and then invited some key players in the industry. So, no IDFA, no problem. I think Tiff's going to drop a link into the comments box for those listening. The main reason is that there's lots of different companies with lots of different opinions, but it's all on the same point of view. It's all on the same issues. So the reality is that the market is no longer a two-sided relationship. It's a marketplace. It's an ecosystem. One person doesn't solve the problem, it impacts a lot more. So effectively Liftoff initiated it and initiated the post IDFA Alliance, includes Chartboost, Fiverr, InMobi, Liftoff, Singular Bungle, and a few more have joined since. It's a mixture of demand side partners, supply side partners, and measurement. So we're all in the same ecosystem. If right now there's only about 21% of inventory that's scan enabled. Sorry, there's a landline ringing. It's only about 21% of inventory is enabled right now for scan, according to the website itself. From an InMobi perspective, we're up around 40% plus. And the key thing with this is that anyone running an attribution campaign, effectively, if they want to attribute through the Apple framework, they need to run on scan enabled. There are other solutions and there's other pieces around that. So we'd always say go to the site itself. And it can really help you understand and find out, and then reach out to your partners with a centralized informed point of view.
Okay, thank you very much, and we'll share that link also on the page when we update it with the resources and links. Quite impressed there, Richard. You still got a landline. Is that, I don't know, is it still a thing?
Tell me about it.
So, Lloyd, with your global perspective, I mean, not just the role that you have, but, you know, sitting in the US in a different market, it's nice to get a view from you. And, you know, we've tried to be as preemptive as we can here. And I know we got like a 6-month break from Apple, as it were. Is it 6 months? It feels like 6 years. But anyway, there's even rumors, if you go on Twitter, that there's going to be another delay now, but I'm not so sure about that one. I think that's clinging. That's clinging to slightly desperate loose ends there. What do you see any unintended ramifications or fallouts that worry you slightly, or are there any predictions that you see that could be unexpected as a result of this approach?
Yeah, well, there are a set of questions that we're going to be looking at as this pans out. And first one is, we talked about IDFA coverage going down drastically after the new version of iOS 14.5 goes live. I am curious to see how the actual IDFA list traffic percentage will look like month over month after the new version rolls out. Also, we're interested to see if apps will actually get better over time in getting the user consent. And some might speculate that would it become inevitable for apps to think about implementing paywall or consent wall of some kind. And also starting to think about like ecosystem-wide level need for standard framework around granular control of privacy and ad experience, right? So should iOS provide more standards around control of ad experience? For example, what about options for do not show me repeated ads, right? Do not show me this ad again, or don't show me ad in these categories. I think the more and more kind of the platform owners and the partners in the ecosystem collaborate in open approach, I think we can tackle these fundamental questions that I think will lead us to a better future, so to speak.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Of course, a consent wall, when you look at it, that's an interesting play. You've got to think that, the ad-funded models worked for, well, the internet for a while now. And in apps, I know it's been a bit of a shift, but the implications there for Apple, there could be some pushback. I mean, that has to be considered. And as you say, that idea of having a consent wall, or maybe even some bit more details in terms of what you're toggling within the experience. It's just how you sort of make consumers aware, or and give them the control that they understand what the implications are. And we also, another bit that was, as we reach out for any questions that come in, someone's asked about the up-to-date list of IDs available. I think that is, I can answer that. That is sitting within the tools platform with the URL, which we'll share with you afterwards. And if there's any specific questions required that needs product support from Tech Lab, you can always come reach out through IB Australia, and we'll let you know. Now, I don't know if there's any final points or questions from yourselves, Richard or Manuela. I mean, there's a bit of me worrying with all the changes from a privacy perspective. First of all, it will all need testing and collaboration with the application or device owners, whether it's Chrome or Apple, to ensure that they are involved in the full testing with the rest of the industry and prepared to evolve their products as a result of any implications. And that's something we're pushing for with all the forthcoming changes. And just the consideration that you sort of predict a landscape of almost a federated smaller little kingdoms being less willing to interact, which isn't what we want at all in terms of supporting the ability of the open internet to thrive. So there's some of the bits that we probably want to keep an eye on in our councils and here in Australia. But as for the panel, thank you so much, panelists. If there's nothing else, I'm going to jump back to my slides, hopefully, although it's been a bit of a disaster today. I'm sorry about that in terms of Mr. Richardson's come in with a question in terms of iOS open in communication with GDPR. Well, I mean, I can tell you that obviously that's something that TechLab have been working with IAB Europe, and essentially that's the purpose of IAB Europe now, is to sit and work in with Brussels, not necessarily lobbying, but working working with. So that's something that we can certainly keep an eye on and feed in the experiences that we're seeing from there. I'm just going to jump back to the slides. Thank you so much, panelists. And wonderful having you on board.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for supporting. A reminder of that SKAD network ID list and the URL. We will share that with the notes, and I think that was covered off in the video as well, so there's no need to go on too much about that. A reminder, in fact, we talk about it in our tech blog today, that we do a quick summary or an introduction to the 4 standards that were released out of Project REARC. There's 2 in the area of accountability, 2 in the area of addressability. So we provide a bit of an intro to that, and we're going to do more on this. And we're going to do the next webinar that we host here at IB Australia in a few weeks' time will be around all things identity. We'll take a closer look at the sort of directions that the future solutions are going. And we'll also work on some split out sessions, potentially across with some APAC sessions we're running with IB Tech Lab. We'll feed them into a nice logical introduction to the overall trends, what's happening specifically around authenticated consumers and universal IDs, and the accountability framework that's been, and this addressability frameworks have been released to potentially support that as proposals, contextual targeting. And this was a renaissance, a return of, quite nostalgic, and the increasingly infamous cohorts. We'll look at each of those areas directly with the appropriate members, which will include, by the way, Trade Desk on UIDs and others, and will include Google on the cohorts discussion. So we look forward to that. Another announcement is that we're launching, and we're very proud of this. This week, you'll see a launch for privacy training. It's the first piece of training that we've developed ourselves with local experts for the market. Traditionally, we've also run sales and ops training that we work in conjunction with the US, but we feel this is an important area to support everyone on increasingly. So please look out for that. And thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for today. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks again to the panel, and have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks, Jonas. Cheers, guys.